Just a little bit about the impetus, like where all this desire to do this came from. And it was over the years just reading these different references to baggage car, mail car, etc. And I started looking at all the books and references I could get my hands on. And another reason to do this was I wanted to get to the bottom of what was this yellow box car, because several people I had talked to over the years said they didn't have yellow. They were the dark blue or dark slate blue color. So there's got to be more data around that. And this was all with the desire to want to build my own, baggage car for the line. Because I saw in Bright's book or a Bright site, he had labeled or indicated that there were baggage cars on a number of lines and mail cars. And I thought, you know what, this would be a great opportunity to really take a look at what did these things possibly look like, and then dispel any misunderstandings of cars referenced and how they may or may not have looked. So three topics that I want to cover here, and I will tell you, like when I'm done, I have a little bit to talk about very briefly on terminology from the time and what we refer to those things today. And after I'm done with that, I'm going to turn it over to Austin, and he's done some work around mail cars, etc. So he'll speak to that later. So I wanted to ascertain the truth as to the cars attached to the general, confirm an educated guess as to the nature of a baggage and/or mail car, and bust up the myth or or confirm the fact that there was a yellow box car that was asserted. So, was there a mail or baggage car in the general train? Boom. In Epstein's book, and this was prior to the departure of Atlanta, in his book, The Andrews Raid, he has found a quote that says Fuller inspected the baggage car. So I guess that was enough for me, at least plausibly, that there was a baggage car attached to the general train as it left Atlanta. And then when he got to the hotel, Pittenger, in his first book of the Great Chase, he had two other books that he wrote after this. But in the first
Three.
one, sorry?
Three. I think he wrote four total.
Did he? Okay. So at the Lacey Hotel, Pittenger in his first book referenced the fact that Alf Wilson went onto the cars as the brakeman, and he clambered over to the foremost baggage car. All right, so there's a second reference to the fact that there was probably a baggage car attached. Then Craig Angle, in his book, The Great Locomotive Chase, he has Knight's quote as saying, Andrews said to cut the bell rope, which extended over the car roofs and through the mail and passenger cars. So he's referring it to as a mail car. And as we go through some of these pictures, you'll see how they might have interchanged those terms. And then at Calhoun, or just north of Calhoun, Pittenger, in his Daring and Suffering, said, we dropped a car on the track and soon after another. This left us with only the locomotive tender and one baggage car. So that would have been attached to the tender, which is interesting. So anyway, just highlighting the fact that all these references were made to a baggage car. And the supposition, if this car was not a box car, it was most likely a baggage, and Knight was mistaken. It wasn't a mail car, but I don't know. So,
It's your Lacey Hotel quote. When you say the foremost baggage car, that to me could imply two baggage cars at least. Otherwise, it would just be
um,
the baggage car.
the
That might
foremost,
be into
which quote you looking at?
Lacey Hotel, Pittenger.
Yep, Brakeman, and the remainder of us climbing in the
First time
foremost baggage. Right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I thank you. Yeah, good point. Good point. Or they just misinterpreted it. Yeah,
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so here's Kurtz's painting when they arrived at the hotel, right? And so clearly that could be the foremost baggage car that Walt you're referencing, which was maybe considered a box car, or maybe it was actually a box car. And the thing that I noticed, which is counter to the movie, there are three passenger cars, and possibly one of those is a baggage car. Um, and I don't know. So just some of the things I've been noticing along the way, and certainly open to other points of view or challenges to what I'm sharing here. And then again, above Calhoun, the Texas picked up two what I think Fuller referred to as the boxcars, and they were dropped off in Resaca, leaving the general with one car. Which by the end of the chase, you'll see that there was a car still attached to the tender when
Of
Fuller
course.
and his crew came up to it. So Fuller, uh, in his letter to Kurtz about the Raiders abandoning the general and the one boxcar that never detached from the general, so he refers to that last car as a boxcar, which is plausible as well. Knight and Pittenger referred to this last car as a mail and baggage, respectfully. So um, there's still some more to unpack with this. And let me see. Do I want to? I want to pull up. So when Epstein highlights the fact that he inspected the baggage car, it was either the one that was attached to the box cars and got separated, or it was actually the car that was attached to the tender. So that's where I'm going with this. Is the baggage car, assuming there was one, was attached to the tender. Because here, Pittenger says the foremost baggage car. So the foremost, to Walt's point, maybe that was two cars down or three cars down from the tender. I'm not exactly sure how to discern where that thing was, but I've got a supposition later. All right, so mail and baggage car styles. This is one I found in White's book from this railroad, and it even says baggage car right on the side. So that's very helpful. Leaves nothing to interpret. And of course, the interesting style here, which I think was pretty common, was the freight door in the middle. Of course, two end doors, the stack. And again, I'm always looking at this from a modeling perspective. So I'm thinking, this could be even an interesting car to detail on the inside. You could have a removable roof and whatever you could possibly research to see how that might have been laid out in the baggage car. And there's just a close up of it. And the
Is that a
freight,
wood side?
sorry,
Can you tell if that's a wood side? I'm so used to slats all the time.
I think it's a horizontal frame because if you look over on the end, these are horizontal versus vertical. So I'm thinking this is a horizontal framed car, but I think it's wood, unless one of the other aficionados are up on that. Um, but it seemed like this freight door was a little bit smaller than what you might find on a box car. Again, I don't know. There's no dimensions for any of these that I found.
No, but if you look at the man standing in it, you've got to figure that that's only about a 3 foot door,
It
scaling by
looks,
the guy that's standing in the door.
yeah, and when you look at the end door, it's not much wider than that, right? Yep,
Exactly. Yeah.
yep,
Maybe a 30-inch door on the vestibule or on the veranda side, and a
right,
36-inch door in the center.
right. And I was also trying to discern when they said baggage, what did that mean? Was that like crates or was it personal luggage and stuff? So it couldn't have been anything real big. So I'm thinking small packages at most and maybe passenger stuff.
Yeah,
Anybody have any clue on that? No. Okay. Here
I
was
think you're on
another.
the right track.
Sorry.
I think you're on the right track that would have been small parcels and passenger stuff
Right.
and the occasional cadaver.
Right. Right. This was a I don't know where I think got this offline when I was looking at I think railroad post office cars or something. And the car that it intrigued me was this one. But when I got to the photo that had a caption, the caption listed this as an early railway post office car, which I thought, well, you know what? That's pretty cool. Even though it's post Civil War, not all of us are strict with that 4 or 5 year time zone or 10-year time zone before 65. And I really like these windows and how they have this outside frame, and it was a bit ornate, interesting color. I would try to figure that out to be, and it had a clear story. But with this car, there was nothing, no information. It was just in White's book. And again, these don't appear to be really wide doors. So I'm thinking, this is probably the baggage car. And and it could be because of the pixelation, but I couldn't discern any kind of writing or wording or lettering on this thing. So again, I'm building a case to see, a two-sided box car, baggage car, might have been plausible. But again, these are northern lines. This one was cool. This was around 1850. And the thing that struck me about this, as we were talking about what the train consist looked like for the general, the comment here was the first eight-wheel baggage cars were little more than box cars with end platforms. So I'm wondering if, in the frenzy of the chase, they may have interchanged the word boxcar with baggage car. And maybe it didn't look like this. Maybe it was a single door, which would have looked like a boxcar, except for the fact that these have uh, roofed end platforms. But I thought the look of this car is very cool. Old Colony Railroad train. I'm not sure where that would have been. Probably a Northern Line.
Massachusetts.
Oh, thank you guys.
And Tom, you gotta consider that during the war, um, they may have pressed boxcars into service as baggage cars too.
Well, that's the other thing. Exactly. So when Pittenger and Knight and anybody else that was referring to that, it could have been where there was baggage. Of course, they were supposedly empty because Fuller was taking them to Tennessee to pick up merchandise to bring it back to Atlanta. But yeah, this could very well have been a baggage car, and somehow there was something about the car that would have given Pittenger and Knight and maybe somebody else the sense that no, that was really a baggage car, but it just looked like a box car.
Well, there's one on the picture before that on the mail. Well, oh, sorry, one more before with a little window to our right. It looks like underneath there's yeah, just under no no yeah, right there, just underneath it, a mail slot. That's when I yeah the next where that other guy's standing. No no
No, I think
maybe
that's
not,
that's just the threshold of the door.
Yeah,
but on the little the window with the curved roof, yeah, that one underneath there.
that.
Yeah, is that a mail? 'Cause I in 1900 early 1900s things I've seen where they put a mail slot in. They don't have the windows, but they do have they put a little basket inside.
Yeah,
People
they
can
had
drop them in the car.
Wow, I have no idea, Walt. That's interesting. I don't know. I don't know. Wow. Okay. But yeah, you can clearly see there's something sticking out there. Huh.
Yeah.
Good eye. Okay, so here's Wilbur's painting of the Atlanta yards, and you can see what I'm interpreting it to be is a baggage car. Now, whether this was the consist before he picked up three empty box cars, I have no idea. But I was just fascinated by the fact that if Wilbur put it in here, there's got to be some marginal plausibility to it, given his research. And the other thing I
Yeah,
found fascinating is that looks like there's kind of a yellow box car there.
you don't know whether Kurtz intended that to be April 12th, 1862.
I do not. I do not. It would have looked more like this one over to the right. Three box cars and then your passenger cars and maybe the baggage car. There's a
Something I've
close up
heard
of
of.
it. What's
You can
that?
uh, correct me if I'm off, but back from the 1840s and 30s, the very early times, passenger cars, they'd want to have one car right behind the locomotive in case it blew up, and then some kind of in car. So if the train got rear-ended, you wouldn't have any people there. I'm wondering if they have passenger, what is it, baggage car there. So if there was any accident, passenger at least one car behind before anything would hit them.
I don't know, but I do remember reading. God, and I forgot to note where I found this source, but there was one that said that um, a baggage car was delivered to an interchange. So, say like Dalton, for example, that the baggage car would have been left in the yard for the East Tennessee and Georgia train to pick up and take it north. Uh, and it did actually reference where in the consist that car was located for that kind of exchange. So I'm thinking it would have been on the end of the train in a situation like that so they could just drop it off. But my apologies, I couldn't locate where I found that source because I thought it was a real interesting little tidbit of minutia. So LeBron built a mold for his own cars, and he built it so that it was four-sided. And I believe this is a Grant Line door, but he took this, I believe he said, from Kurtz's painting. And the interesting thing was, and I'm not sure, I don't even know if he remembers, how he was able to distinguish the fact that there was mail on one side and baggage on another. And I do believe, so, and one of you guys can please chime in on this, that there was such a thing called the Confederate States mail at that time, correct? Or we don't know?
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, it was.
Okay, okay. Uh, yeah, I was hoping he'd be on here to help justify why he decaled it this way. And if he couldn't come up with a decent justification, we could at least razz him about it. But I'm going to have to wait till he sees the recording and maybe he'll give me a nasty call. This is the one I was telling you about that a friend of mine built. He took a few Mantua cars, didn't get this very well, this seam here, but he built it as a combine. And I do not believe that the W&A had such a car at the time. Matter of fact, I think those were kind of rare, although I did find some photographs of those, which I'll share with you. The only thing I did was I added the grab irons, the handrails, and the vents. Um, and I just might change the color and make it for a different line if I can find out who had a combine at the time.
I've never seen a combine that long.
I know. I was
The
what?
Lackawanna did have combines of that size and look
Really?
at the time period,
There
though
was.
they were slightly more, yes, on the Lackawanna, though they were slightly more ornate than those, as per the fact that the D&H would actually copy the designs.
Very good. Okay, thank you for that. That's great.
You're welcome.
Yep. And I think who was it that said this was too long to be a combine?
I thought it's too long. I've never seen a combine that long, but I don't know Lackawanna, so.
Yeah, I agree, Walt. I think yeah, I bet yeah, good. That's a good
I thought
call
it
out
wasn't
too.
until we had steel underneath that you could make a car that long.
Well, no,
There
the
was some
actually
pretty long cars
the
then.
passenger cars on the W&A I know were like 48 feet long. And John Ott or John Bott might be able to confirm that or tell me I'm full of baloney.
Yeah, 50-foot cars were that was normal.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah,
I
this
hate
one
it.
right here, you could put a cupola on the right hand side of it, just past the door, and you'd have a perfect Central Pacific caboose.
Ah,
Yeah.
thank you, John. Okay, good. Well, I'm glad at least you validated the length of those cars because I really don't want to build new ones. Thank you.
Go west, young man.
Yeah, yeah. I got to tell you, you know, the stories about how I built stuff and then doing these Zoom calls early on, and LeBron and I would go back and forth with each other about, are you going to change the color of your cars? No, I mean neither. It, I'm always a little bit tentative about doing a presentation because I never know what it is I might have to redo. So possible general train configuration is like it was the loco, the tender, the three box cars, then a baggage car, two passenger cars. That's one way I'm thinking of it. But yet Pittenger said the last car on the train was a baggage car. So when they had to jump ship, when they got into Ringgold, he said the last car there was a baggage car attached to the tender. I don't know. They coupled the train at the baggage car, leaving it in the two passenger cars, retaining the three box cars. So again, that's that leads back to the comment or the quote earlier where they mentioned that the baggage car was left behind and it was the lead car, but I don't know. Two box cars were dropped by the Raiders, of course, and the last one stayed with the general, which may have been a baggage car. So a baggage. Now this is a segue into like what's this with this yellow box car stuff, and this was cool. I got some of this stuff from Austin and Sam, who was also I met through Discord. So in Epstein's book, remember I mentioned Fuller inspected the baggage car, etc., before they left Atlanta. In Bonds' book, Stealing the General, he has a quote in there where the pursuers came upon the empty yellow freight car. And also in that book, the Texas was soon underway. Again, the yellow box car now in the lead. I was like, whoa, okay. So several references to that. And then in Pittenger's book, this is the one, man. This soon left us with only the locomotive, tender, and one baggage car. So that would tell me that of those three box cars that the Raiders took off with, the one next to the tender was the baggage car. So, Walt, to your point earlier, when you just saw those three cars and you asked, was that done, like around, was Kurtz doing that as a precursor to the chase? I guess another plausibility is there was a baggage car which looked like a box car, followed by two box cars, and then you had the two or three passenger cars beyond it. So it's a fascinating inquiry. And then,
Um,
yeah,
it's not inconsistent, and I'm just going to throw this out because I love to murky the waters, I guess. But as you mentioned, those three box cars were being um, worked northward to their ultimate destination. But I would think it wouldn't have been wouldn't have been unusual if they'd have just thrown some baggage in. You know what I'm saying?
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
And
So when
it sure could have found a box car that just had baggage in that had been thrown in, even though it was an empty being worked farther north up the line. And to him, that was a baggage car. It's it's not inconsistent,
right,
um, but it doesn't help in defining things any.
right. Well, I go back to that earlier photo that I showed you where the comment about one of the first eight-wheel baggage cars were nothing. They looked nothing more like a baggage car with um, end platforms with a roof.
Yeah,
So
that actually looked like two box cars that had been spliced together on one frame almost.
yeah, exactly. Um, and then here, though, 4 pages later, he says we broke open the forward end of the only box car we had left. So on page 65, he refers to it as a baggage car. On page 69, he refers to it as a box car. So to your point, it might have been a baggage car that was a box car that was designated for baggage. But that's that's why I love this era, because you can almost, as long as some plausibility, you can kind of build what fits into those boundaries. So, could all three boxcars have been yellow penitentiary cars? For those of you that don't know about this, this might be interesting. So, here was a piece of article that came out of the Savannah Republican, and this was sent to me by Austin and Sam. And the punchline here is here. The cars have a yellow color, which we suppose Mr. Wadley had adopted for the state road, and they bear the stamp made by the Georgia Penitentiary. So not only were they yellow, but somewhere on the car it appears they were stamped, quote unquote, made by the Georgia Penitentiary, which I thought, whoa, okay. So yellow, was there a couple of dark slate blue cars? I mean, who knows? But that was a real validation right there. And then Sam and Austin also sent me these two diagrams. Here you have map 1, Georgia State Penitentiary of Milledgeville and Midway, 1860 to 65. And here's the pen, and here's the Central Railroad of Georgia, and you can see the track goes right into the penitentiary. Further validation that at the very least they were building cars for the state road. This one's even cooler. This gives you some inside details. And here it is, the railroad car shops right on the edge of the track of the central of Georgia. And, you know, my thought was, wow, how did they get the car built and then transfer it onto that track? But who knows? There's so many nuances to what this space might have looked like. But I thought, okay, there it is. There were yellow box cars at the very least. And I think, Austin, check me with this. Was there another type of car that you found that was built in there other than a box car?
That's all I could find.
Okay. Um, yeah, and I think Jerry Dykstra researched some cars, and there were cars that were actually made to haul cotton. And I'm almost positive he told me those two were made in the penitentiary. So again, there's some cool stuff that you could apply to whatever you're doing, especially if it's the WNA. Concluding remarks. It included 2 passenger cars and a baggage car, plus 3 box cars or freight cars. The last remaining car dropped by the Raiders is said to have been a baggage car. However, given Pittenger's quotes, it may have only been a box. WNA freight cars included those of a yellow color, in addition to those of the dark slate blue tone, as per Kurtz's remarks to Colonel Bogle, based on Fuller's recall. Question. Is it so that a boxcar could have been used as a baggage car, hence Pittenger's quote from page 65? Or did Pittenger get it wrong like so many other assertions that he had? So that's where I ended up with this. And these were the sources. This was killer. WNA rulebook for engine men and conductors. Wow. That really gives you some insight, which leads into my next part of the presentation around terminology. But there's so much more I found by just taking on this endeavor. So that's why I like doing this stuff, because I'm always learning something new. At the very least, I'm learning what I needed to do differently before I built anything. But I don't tell anybody that,
And,
unless it's you guys. All right.
and
So
Tom,
yes,
and remember, Mitchell, General Mitchell, when he took Huntsville, he outlined everything that he captured, and it said two Southern mail, MAIL, in addition to the hundreds of mails. But so yes, and so he called it two Southern mail cars.
right. And I'm wondering if it was just because there was mail in those cars, or were they labeled Southern Mail or Confederate mail?
Well,
Interesting.
he itemized, the box cars and the flat cars, all the locomotives, and then the two mails.
Got it. Wow. Okay.
If I
When I
Uh,
was researching earlier for about mail cars, one of the things they talked about a huge difference in the beginning 1900s when they put metal floors in. Before that, because they were wood floors, for mail, you take produce and so on to get things delivered fast, but a lot of times they'd get squished or whatever. And mail cars were notorious for having stinky floors. Instead, they put straw and stuff on to help absorb all the vegetable juices and junk that would be crudding it up. And then in the wintertime, they had to have the doors open to get some air, but it'd blow all the straw around. And anyway, it was the between the odor and so on. I wouldn't think you'd mix baggage with that stuff because otherwise your passengers are going to end up with rotten produce smelling baggage.
that's interesting. Yeah, you know what? They might have. Yeah, that's a good point because I know the WNA shipped lots of produce, and to your point, they might have had to uh, isolate in some manner or another. Fascinating. Okay.
if I if I may,
Yep.
I do know that there was a lot of roads that had boxcars that had doors and platforms on the ends, especially in the Northeast. There was a couple. So possibly the confusion might come from the fact that they could have been platformed boxcars with doors on their ends rather than baggage cars, because at that time and period they were pretty much the same thing. The only
And
really notable difference would be if it was a box car that had a bulkhead rather than a door frame. And then you get even more confusing when you have platformless cabooses from the same period, like on the Jersey Central.
right. Yeah, I think typically boxcars did not have end platforms. Um, and I'm not too familiar with the northern railroads, but yeah, that's an interesting point, man. Thank you.
Welcome.
So, railroaders and their lexicon. Why be concerned about a common language? Bang. To ensure that we know what one period railroader is referring to and not blur the term with our contemporary understandings. And this leads to avoiding a miscommunication, leading to a misunderstanding at the least, at worst, operational errors on my layout. To promote prototypical modeling and operations, because I know some of you guys realize that I try to replicate a prototype as much as possible. And it's fun when we're using the actual language, enhance an authentic experience. Again, reinforcing what I just said. And so here's some common railroad terms, and these came out of the rule book. So here's the terms that we use that I would consider contemporary. Of course, that could be over the last maybe 100 years. But back then, this is what they referred to according to the rule book. So a turnout was called a switch. And I've read in a couple of places where anytime they talked about switching, they never used the term turnout, at least what I've uncovered. And I could be, completely wrong on that one. Siding back then was referred to, today was referred to as a turnout. And it's given, the rule book gives a couple of examples of how that's referenced. And they usually say that it's when it's going to a track that I interpret as anything off the main. It was a turnout. The engineer today was referred to as an engine man or engine driver. Now, when I was reading some of Kurtz's exchanges, of course, these were done in the early 1900s, '02, '03, etc. And there were references to an engineer. My guess is, at the very least, um, the term engineer was more prevalent around the time he was doing his interviews. And maybe that term was even used then, but at least for the WNA, I didn't see any references contemporarily of the time to engineer. Boxcars were referred to as house cars or baggage cars. Here we go again. A siding was a passing siding or a spur. A handcar back then was referred to as a push or pull car, and a caboose was a box, house, or way car. So I thought that was pretty interesting to, at least in my own head when I'm speaking, know what I'm talking about. And when I have crews here, we I try to encourage accurate use of the terminology again, just to put you into the space of the vibe of the time. So train consist descriptions. Charlie helped me out with one of these. This is pretty straightforward, and you guys might want to expand on this. But when I was looking at way freight and accommodation trains, here's what I believe was the interpretation: that a way freight didn't have passengers, but it stopped at all stations. And the accommodation train was passengers only and also stopped at all stations. Does anybody have anything that can confirm or adjust that interpretation?
Oh, looks like you got it right.
Mr. Ott, if that's coming from you, that's good enough for me. The terms as well,
I'm going to
right?
assume unit.
Go
I'm
ahead,
going to
Walt.
assume unit train is something very modern then.
Yes. At least I never saw it in anything that I've read.
Yeah.
Okay. So before I hand it off to Austin, I just want to remind you all that we have these 3 months. God, this is so cool having these things so set up ahead of time. So John's going to be sharing. What's the fella's name again, John, that did the paintings?
P.H. Carruthers.
Carruthers, right, right. And then we'll have Chris in January. Evidently, he and his team have been really doing a lot of work on City Point. And then in February, we'll have DC or LeBron on their layout updates. And in March, it might be one of those two guys or something else. So keep in mind that, if you got something you would like to share with us, even if it's only 15, 20 minutes, it doesn't matter. Love to have you share some knowledge or information that we could find fun and engaging. So with that, I'm going to hold on the express companies, hit my escape, and then drop this out. Drop this out. So Bobkin or Chad, can you help Austin get his PowerPoint up? Or do I
I
have
got
to?
it.
You
Yep.
got it?
Yeah, you just have to press stop streaming on your screen. That's the middle button.
Got it.
All right, I will start sharing mine.
Watch stream. Oh, there you are.
All right, can everyone see that?
Sure.
Yep.
Oh, am I out of? Hold on.
You might want to hit from beginning.
Close screen.
Mail and railroads in the Civil War.
Oh, there's watch.
If it's bugging out on you, share your entire screen instead of the one window.
Yeah, hold on. There we go. Got it.
There you go.
Alrighty. So with all this talk with me and Tom talking about the baggage cars and the mail cars, I decided to go into a deep dive on how not only were mail cars used, but how was mail delivered during the war. So there was a lot of digging into what made railroads appeasable for the post office department. So in the very beginning, as soon as the railroads became a very popular mode of transportation, the post office, or the United States Postal Department, as it was called then, saw it as a great opportunity to expedite the mail travel. Before that, it was by stagecoach and a steamboat. They relied heavily on riverboat traffic to extend the mail service to the south and west. So in 1823, Congress declared all steamboat routes to be post roads subject to federal regulations. Although steamboats provide the most reliable and rapid transport of the mail service, it was far from spectacular. Weather and accidents delayed service. Steamboat captains found it hard to stick to the regular schedules demanded in postal contracts, and the financial rewards of the mail contracts were often not worth the inconvenience. So, in part of the response to criticism from businesses and the public that the mail, then moving by horse and stagecoach, was too slow, the Postmaster General in the early 1830s decided to put the mail on the trains. So the first mail contract by the post office was purportedly given to the B&O in 1834, although a claim has been made that the South Carolina Railroad was delivering mail as early as 1831. But what is verified, though, is that in December of 1832, a stagecoach firm by the name of Slaymaker and Tomlinson began carrying the mail by rail from Lancaster to West Chester, Pennsylvania, marking the official use of rail to transport the mail. From then on, regular mail trains were on scheduled routes on almost every road in the country. An act of Congress designated all railroads as official U.S. postal routes in 1838. And this is an ad showing the mail routes taken by the railroads.
Hmm.
Now, unfortunately, there's no illustrations of the earliest form of a mail car. This is of a Pennsylvania Railroad mail car. You can notice it also says baggage on it, so you could possibly call it an early form of a combine. Um, a note from John White said that mail cars were being clad with tin as being built as early as 1847, specific mail cars. Route agents would travel in these cars to sort and process mail along the way, uh, not to the point of what we think of as the Rotary Post Office that we've seen in later years, but more along the lines of they would process the bagging of the mail to know which towns it was going to so they can be sorted out from there. On a good day, a route would make up to 20 stops and usually would take up to 15 hours to finish. Mail carriers worked 7 days a week. Most mail cars had no heat, and they were frequently used to ship the deceased home from
Right.
if they were being buried elsewhere. Complaints were very much of the norm for many route agents, and as a mail carrier myself, it still continues to this day. Now, when did they start sorting mail inside the mail cars? It was not an actual new concept by the Civil War. A newspaper report in 1838 describes the mail sorting within mail cars built to the direction of the post office. And but this was because the concept was actually came out of the British railway system. The postmaster general at the time wrote very highly about the Britain's use of mail cars as a mobile post office. So it was copied in some routes. A lot of reports of that service show up through the 1850s, but this process was up to each post division and the railroad contract that the post office had. So few routes did this on a massive scale. Turns out that the beginning of the railway post office had a connection with the Pony Express, the famed wild western horse riders that we know and love. The Pony Express formed in 1860 to expedite mail travel from east to the west, starting out from St. Joseph, Missouri to San Francisco, California. It was something to pass over or be compared to the slower Butterfield Overland stage lines. The mail for the first westbound Pony Express was carried via the Hannibal and St. Joseph Railroad, which went from Hannibal to the most western terminus of St. Joseph. And it was carried by Locomotive, Missouri.
Hmm.
On March 31st, 1860, the first Pony Express mail was dispatched from Washington, New York by a messenger on board to St. Joseph. An interesting event that happened, which might have carried a record for the time, was that when the messenger delivering the satchel from New York and Washington missed a connection in Detroit and arrived in Hannibal 2 hours late. The railroad crew cleared the track and dispatched the Missouri with a one-car train to make the 206-mile trek across Missouri in a record 4 hours and 51 minutes, on average 40 miles per hour. So this was high speed in 1860.
Right. Right. Neither wind nor
But
rain nor mist stops.
unfortunately so. Um, Despite the closing of Pony Express because of the telegraph system and the upcoming Civil War, it did prove that fast mail travel was actually possible. Now, because it shut down, the postmaster of St. Joseph noticed that the overland mail was getting backed up. So his solution will be to produce the first officially recognized mobile post office. The assistant postmaster of St. Joseph, William A. Davis, went to Postmaster General Montgomery Blair to ask if he could create a specific mail car to sort mail along the way
Hmm.
to make it easier convenience instead of having to move in bulk. So Montgomery Blair called for the establishment of the first RPO on the Hannibal and St. Joseph Railroad. The Hannibal St. Joseph furnished a baggage car altered to the postmaster's specifications. It was very crude, but the car contained a 65 pigeonhole letter case, small work tables, and oversized doors allowed for easy access. Fortunately, because it was during the war, harassment of Confederate guerrillas, and a massive lack of maintenance, it resulted in several suspensions and finally an abandonment of this experiment in 1863. But the idea caught on. In 1864, the third assistant postmaster under Montgomery Blair, A.N. Zevely, was experimenting with the use of baggage cars to sort and transport the mail.
Wow.
He convinced the Mount Clair shops of the B&O to furnish him with a custom-built coach designed specifically to carry and sort the mail en route between New York and Washington, D.C. He also employed two of his agents out of the Chicago post office to practice the idea out west, George Armstrong and Harrison Park. Armstrong established the very first long-distance RPO route between Chicago and Clinton, Iowa on the Chicago Northwestern. The success of these experiments became the mass application of the idea on routes established between New York and Washington, Chicago and Rock Island, Illinois, Chicago and Burlington, and New York and Erie, Pennsylvania. And this is the earliest illustration we have of a specific postal coach for the purpose of sorting mail
Wow.
uh, before it gets to the assumed offices.
That was
One thing
That's
interesting,
1864?
1864, yes.
one thing interesting also, I'm used to in passenger cars, they would have chandeliers going down the middle, but there all the lights are on the edge of the wall. So if you're holding mail, your shadow wouldn't go across it because your mail is right against the light is right against the walls.
Right.
Right. Yep.
Good eye.
And according to the specs, this had I think it was a 500 pigeonhole set of shelves
Oh, man.
for sorting. Now this is on RPOs. Now, how did the mail service prosper through the Civil War? When the Civil War began, the Postal Service collaborated with the military authorities to ensure the smooth delivery of mail from Union front lines to the home front. Once the actual fighting started in April of 1861 with the firing on Fort Sumter, the Post Office Department began experiencing increasing difficulties in handling the mail within and across the Confederate borders. Escalating hostilities, coupled with the desire by the U.S. government to inflict hardship on the Confederacy, caused the United States Postmaster to suspend all mail service to from within the Confederate States on May 31st, 1861. Well, the Confederate States had a backup plan. when the Confederate States Constitution was written, it was provided for a national postal service to be established. In March of 1861, it was. John Reagan, a Democratic senator from Texas, was appointed by Jefferson Davis to be the first Confederate Postmaster General.
I'll be damned.
And as you can see, it took over operations immediately after the U.S. Post Office Department ceased operations to the southern states. Reagan was a very sly individual, very smart, very clever. He placed 8,500 of the nation's 28,000 post offices under Confederate control and sought assistance from Southern sympathizers in the U.S. Post Office. He tried to bring on not just employees from the federal system into his, but also that they could bring in the ways of maps, reports, forms, and plans that would build and strengthen the new service. So we sent an agent to Washington, D.C. with letters asking the heads of the United States Post Office Department's various boroughs to work for him. He declared, quote, all contractors, mail messengers, and special contractors for conveying the mail within the Confederate States under existing contracts with the government of the United States are hereby authorized to continue to perform such service under my direction. And fortunately for him, nearly all did so and brought copies of the records, contracts, account books, etc. Historian William C. Davis later wrote that Reagan had in effect stolen the U.S. Post Office. By raising the postage rates, reducing service, and practicing strict economy, Reagan made the Confederate Post Office Department self-sustaining by the end of 1863, as per it was noted in the Confederate Constitution, effectively presiding over the only CSA cabinet department that functioned well during the war. He was unfortunately the first and only Confederate postmaster of the Confederate States.
Right.
But as blockades and invading Northern Army, as well as a scarcity of postage stamps, severely hampered operations. By the end of the war, when almost all the materials were in short supply, letters and envelopes were turned inside out and reused. It was not uncommon to see a letter written in one direction, turned sideways, and written in the other direction to conserve paper.
Wow.
And here an example of a Confederate letter stamp. I could not find any evidence that they would have lettered their own mail cars, but I wouldn't see it out of the realm of possibility.
Right. Or you can say they didn't exist, and this way I can tell LeBron that he's got to, unload that car.
So for many soldiers, what? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
All right. The Civil War was a forced extended absence from home. Their letters often included references both to the loneliness of life and the horrors of the conflict.
Right.
Letters from home will always welcome relief in a soldier's day. Families were not the only ones eager for words from their loved ones at war. And for the first time, newspaper publishers could actually rely on soldiers' letters for first-person depictions of the battles. Now, the armies assigned personnel, usually under the quartermaster corps, to collect, distribute, and deliver soldiers' mail. Wagons and tents served as traveling post offices. Some soldiers wrote home weekly. Some seemed to spend all their free time writing, as it was the main source of correspondence back in the day. No texting, no emails. A letter from home could be tucked into a pocket close to a soldier's heart to be read and reread in moments of loneliness. Many soldiers carried letters in their pockets to be forwarded to the loved ones if they were killed in action. And more examples of not the more glorious side of war, but the more human side. Many soldiers reading and writing letters. Mail also functioned as a physical lifeline as much as emotional one. Troops asked for clothes, foods, medicines, illicit alcohols, and news of any type. Friends and family were obliged as best they could, but as did the Postal Service. There were accounts of deliveries speeded enough to transport cooked meats and jarred fruits to their addresses. Books, journals, magazines, newspaper publishers also supplied their subscribers through the mail. More than anything else, the men simply asked their friends and family to send a letter in return, plus paper, ink, stamps if they could. Unfortunately, enemy activity, mobile armies, and the low priority of mail bags on supply trains meant that soldiers wrote far more letters than they received. Fortunately, early on in the war, the Post Office Department introduced improvements that made it easier to send and receive mail for soldiers deployed away from home. Congress passed a law in 1861 allowing soldiers to mail their letters without prepaying for postage, provided the envelopes were endorsed soldier's letter and were certified as such by bearing the signature of the major with his regiment indicated by the number and state. Postage would be paid upon delivery to the families.
Wow.
So, kind of a flick in the booger, but it was understandable at the time. This was an account by a Union soldier in Virginia as dealing with how quickly they moved and how it was very common not to be able to get the letters to them
From home.
on the correct dates. Several large army camps, such as Camp Dennison in Ohio, prepared postmarks to deal with the thousands of letters generated by soldiers stationed at or passing through the camp. Mail exchange between divided states was only allowed to cross lines at specified exchange points.
Mm.
Mail, which was going from the north, destined to points in the south, passed primarily through City Point, Virginia, while most of the mail going from the south to the north passed through Fort Monroe, Virginia. While on campaign, the mail would take longer to get to the men, but 1 to 2 weeks for a letter or package was a reasonable time frame for a letter to get to a soldier in the field. Um, I, I've read personal accounts of soldiers coming across an abandoned mail wagon with mail inside in a field, uh, wondering what had happened. And interesting of note, when Sherman finally made contact with the Union by taking Fort McAllister, Georgia, part of on Savannah's defenses, after being out of contact during his march to the sea, he was delivered 20 tons of mail to his army.
20 tons. Damn.
Trust me, that's a drop in the bucket to what we deal with today. Provost marshal's offices were often used as designated points for soldiers to drop off and receive mail from home. This is the provost marshal's office in City Point. And tents, obviously, were used as mobile post offices. They would follow the armies. This one is in Culpeper, Virginia, close to the Brandy Station battlefield.
Neat.
And I'm not quite sure if Bernie has this modeled yet, but this one was taken to Falmouth, Virginia, with some of the crew, some of the personnel that were delegated to service the troops with the post office. And in this corner here, the post office actually helped deliver a lot of the absentee ballots of soldiers at the front during the 1864 election,
Ah, yeah.
which most likely, unfortunately, swayed the balance of the election towards Lincoln than McClellan. And on Adams Express,
Mm-hmm.
so these were separate companies delivering express, such as like FedEx and UPS today. At the time, there were three major express companies in operation throughout the South: American Express, or American Letter Express, Adams Express, and Whiteside's Express. They were operating freely for approximately 2 months until the U.S. Post Office ordered an end to such traffic, effective in August of 1861. Mail destined to states that were not among their own unions now had to be sent by flag of truce, although some express companies still continue to run their mail operations illegally, like smuggling. Adams continued its southern operations under a nominally separate Southern Express Company, when in actuality it was just a subsidiary. Adams Express began transmitting letters across the lines between their offices in Nashville and Louisville in June of '61. The sender paid the CSA and USA postage plus an express fee of 22 cents per half ounce. The American Letter Express Company and Whiteside companies similarly offer the cross-the-line express mail service. all private mail express mail service was terminated by a presidential proclamation in August of 61. So the Adams Express Company applied, quote, free for the regiment markings to mail which they carried free of charge between New York regiments and those defending the capital in April to May 1861.
Oh,
So
Austin,
These,
you want to go
that was
I'm
back to
sorry.
that? Go back to the previous slide. Charlie has a comment.
Oh, yeah, that's Chattanooga.
Yep.
You have
Um,
Nashville on there.
oh, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I can't remember where I got that photo from. Thank you for the correction.
It's a great
Yeah, it's a
photo.
great photo.
These were the only examples I could find of baggage cars on U.S. military railroads, which presumably would have carried the mail as well. So
Nice.
during the war, mail was delivered to quartermaster stations, army encampments, and former stations on the roads taken over by the military railroad. Baggage cars were usually taken from those roads or built on house car frames in Alexandria. Mail was sorted by corps, brigade, and then regiment and delivered in bulk to the quartermaster to be sorted out per unit. And this brings me on to how was food delivered, especially for timely holiday Thanksgiving, which for a little context there, um, the reason why Abraham Lincoln proclaimed a day of Thanksgiving, the fourth Thursday of every November, was because he was written a letter by a young lady named Sarah Josepha Hale, who is widely known now as the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Hmm.
She wrote a letter to him asking for the president to create a national observance of the holiday, uh, more as a permanent fixture because many presidents in the past had done so as well, but it wasn't a federal holiday. Um, so, what was Thanksgiving dinner and celebrations like for the troops? Soldiers were delivered food for the celebration by settlers and charity organizations like the Sanitary Commission. One account notes that the Sanitary Commission sent a meal to the field that consisted of turkey, chicken, and apples, but a day too late. A soldier noted, quote, it isn't the turkey, but the idea we care for.
Hmm.
Some received food from home, comforting care packages like cookies and candies from their loved ones. Turkeys for these occasions were preserved in brine, in barrels, and shipped in vented house cars. You can see many of the examples here enjoying around the fire. Uh, you can see the apple pies, turkeys being carved, apples. This is Cedar Point Station on the City Point line as an example of the food shipment. A personal account of Edward J. Bartlett of Concord, Massachusetts, reads about his Thanksgiving celebration. He enlisted at just age 20 in 1862. In his letters home of November that year, he described his first Thanksgiving as a soldier, the elaborate preparations, the decorations, especially the food. Quote, first we had oysters, then turkey and chicken pie, then plum pudding, then apple raisin, and coffee with plenty of good soft bread and butter. After we had all eaten a little too much, as people usually do on Thanksgiving days, and we had lived so long on hardtack, we did our best to have a fine sing. The meal was followed by songs, including Auld Lang Syne, speeches, toasts to President Lincoln and the troops, games, and a dance. Deep in hostile territory, the men were determined to celebrate, quote, in the true home style. He concluded that the whole day was very successful. Everything went off pleasantly, not a thing went wrong. We were surprised that such a dinner could be got up in this godforsaken country. 'Twas pleasant to celebrate a Thanksgiving in such a way. The day itself, however, proved to be a rousing celebration that included music and dancing, horse races, sack races. A quote from him says, such a roar of laughter I've never heard before. Most of them were flat in the dirt before they'd gone 3 steps. Included wheelbarrow races, a turkey shoot, greased pole climbing, and a greased pig chase. He says
Yeah.
about this made more sport than all the rest put together. He again, so unsurprisingly, lingered over his description of the meal: oysters, turkey, duck, beef, chicken, vegetables, apple pie, pumpkin pie, mince pie, and with a good finishing off with cigars.
That
And
composite picture on the top left of it, it looks like a sack race, but then you have like a pole to jump over also.
Oh
possibly like
yeah.
Or
like
you crawl underneath it, one of the
challenge.
two.
Yeah, I
Interesting.
think that was the Jamaican regiment.
That's cool.
I think it's like a relatable sentiment we all feel soon pretty enough.
That's great.
Those noses indicate alcohol.
The what?
Their noses were all dark
Oh,
at the end of the nose. I'm wondering if
right.
that was from the alcohol.
Could be, man. God. Wow. That was cool, Austin. I
It was
presume
really
you're.
interesting to look into it. And if anyone has any corrections to be made, thank you, Charlie, for that one. Please let me know. I would definitely love to learn more.
Yeah, just building on that, there is a photo of an Adams Express in Nashville. I can send that to you, and you can drop that in that your presentation. That
Okay.
was great, man. You found some really great images, um, and it's a very apropos for the season, given what's coming up next week. Very good.
One thing your presentation also brought up, that first mail car you showed that was very short. I don't know if any of that tension wire is underneath it. I can't remember what it's called. But that
Truss
was a
rod.
short car and it had that, yeah, truss rod. So I assume if that car is going to have a truss rod and like that long one that you have, Tom, I would think on just about in that era, all those wooden cars would have truss rods.
It's
Well,
interesting. Go ahead, Austin.
on that car that is shown, I'm not too. I'm a bit hesitant to say that's the actual size of the car. Um, that car does still exist, and that photo was taken very much later, and it's been used as promotional material for railroad events. Um, I'm not quite sure if that is the original car or if it is the original car and it's been rebuilt or it is a replication. So, but that is the only reference we have to the Hannibal and St. Joseph mail car.
Yeah, looking at some period photos, I've seen a number of house cars where there were no truss rods, which was, I think,
Really?
I
Okay.
remember Jerry Dykstra when we were down at Savannah saying something about when those were used or how they were used. John Ott or anybody, do you have an idea?
Truss rods were kind of optional, especially in the early days. Um, 30 cars under 30 feet, really didn't need them all that much.
Right. Yep. Good. Um, okay. Any questions, comments, anything else? Oh, good. We can see everybody again. Okay.
Uh, can I share my screen for a moment? I got some old courier and knives that might be relevant to Tom's inquiry.
Awesome. Let us see them.
Okay, hang on.
Oh, watch stream.
Here we
Okay.
go. Want to see a yellow baggage car? Anybody see that?
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Back to Tom's argument, I think the book that where they were referencing, well, is this a box car or a baggage car? I kind of think the terms were almost interchangeable because there wasn't much difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
might have been just a baggage car back then. Might be nothing else than a repurposed boxcar.
Yeah.
These
Yep.
are all courier and Ives from the 1850s,
Wow. Wow.
and there's not much difference between that and a boxcar.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it was interesting. I was hoping to find in Kurtz's notes where he got the idea to do that one like passenger car in the Atlanta yards that looked like a long passenger car, but it was just a side door with a couple of windows. But those are very good, John. Man, look at that. Interesting. A red door too. Do you know what line that's from?
No, courier and
Okay.
Ives. These are just kind of generic. I wouldn't
Yep.
trust the colors all that much either.
That looked very Christmassy with all that
Mhm.
red. Even on the cow catcher thing in front, red. They
Yeah.
really paint that red.
Well,
Yeah.
you got to remember these things were decorations for people's houses. They didn't use wild colors for that stuff. I mean, that would kind of defeat the purpose of the thing. So all the colors that you do see on Courier and Ives, they're most likely close to
Hmm.
what
Hmm.
the actual thing would have looked like,
Right.
but probably not terribly exact.
Yeah, I remember reading
But
some
what
stuff.
the point I wanted to make was that, in the early days, baggage cars were just repurposed box cars.
Yeah, I think you're right.
They
These
didn't-
all kind of look like they're northeastern or northern lines. Your three prints.
yeah, they
I could
probably
be wrong.
are. They probably were. But also in the Northeast, you had fancier baggage stuff,
Oh,
like
Yeah.
wow.
like the one that I built for my railroad.
That's nice. Is that scratch?
Yep.
Dag, John.
I
We
was
gotta
looking
get.
over your model going for the presentation. I was like, should I include this without asking John? I'll just leave him to show off his masterpiece.
Well, this was a car that ran in Connecticut, so really not that terribly relevant to Western and Atlantic,
That's gorgeous. That's HO too, right?
right?
Whose trucks are you using there?
I think they were Bachmann trucks.
Okay.
Mm.
God, I
Yeah,
guess.
them and platforms were swiped off an old Bachmann car.
Wow. I guess in March you could do a layout update for us.
Oh, someday.
Okay. That was great. Thank you, John. Wow. God, I'm ready to get back to the railroad here. Um, close your stream. Okay. It's there. Cool. Good. All right, guys. If there's no other questions or comments, going once.
I got something.
Yep.
Okay, so long story short, like I've said the past few meetings, feel free to join us. We'll probably be in voice chat one up above if you guys ever feel the inkling to join. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
Great. I might join you. So again, I want to thank Chad, aka Daniel, Bobkin, and Austin for continuing to be our air traffic controllers to pull this together, at least for me, because I'm still learning the ropes. Thank you guys. Um, there's another fella, Sam, I've been exchanging with on Discord once in a while, who's given us some really terrific information, like that article from the Southern paper about the penitentiary and those maps, and Austin for doing the work in his presentation. Thank you much, man. I know it takes a lot, and you did some really nice work putting those slides together.
It was kind of
And
a personal project.
that makes it even more fun because I want you to do it because it stokes your furnace. So all right, I will see you guys hopefully in December with John out on deck, and the happiest of Thanksgivings to you all. In Jersey, we are relevating in the fact that we've got rain, so it's been cool.
Yay.
All the best, my brothers.
You too.
Happy
Good guy.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.